creating diatonic chord progressions. This topic has actually creeped up on how hard it is for most people to create progressions, and I've always wondered why. Dealing with both students or just in general people having a hard time creating chord progressions, and then it started to dawn on me when I would listen to what they were saying, and I realized that there are two things that are stopping them from creating chord progressions. One I'll talk about today, and that's that chord progressions aren't actually created. We're actually using the same kind of material that people have been using for a very long time, especially in diatonic music. Let's do a little test here. The famous Jurassic Park theme from John Williams. Did he create a chord progression here? There's a little suspension there. Maybe a pedal point, but we'll write the bass chords out here in a second. Did he create a chord progression here when he wrote this? Well, let's look at the chords. I'm going to go ahead and input the bass chords, meaning the most basic version of this sequence uses these three chords: B flat, E flat, F. That's all it uses. Okay, this is just typical use of 1, 4, 5 in B flat. So the question arises, are we creating a new chord progression? And not necessarily in the order of 1, 4, 5 like this. But you could use 1, 4, 5. I'm not creating a new progression if I use these three chords in some kind of combo like this. It's still 1, 4, 5 music. I'm just using inversions. It's still 1, 4, 5. In other words, using the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord. So the answer is no, he did not create a new chord progression. He used a well-known formula to create new music. And once you realize that almost 90% of all music is a known formula, I would say 90% of all diatonic music is a known formula, then you can actually relax and just start using it. This includes modal moves, whatever. So when you're looking for the magic pill of the chord progression, stop looking, start using what's already known, because that's probably what you're going to end up with anyways in a diatonic chord sequence. It's most likely that whatever you come up with has already been tried. The story might change if you use a lot of chromaticism and modulation. So here's my hint to you. Instead of looking for chord progressions, concentrate on what you already know and become better at using that. If you obsess over just coming up with chord sequences, you're going to spend more time doing that than you are creating. Become better at creating with what you already know. And sometimes you will reach a stage where you've learned so much you actually can go back to simpler things and come up with endless ways to use them. But oppositely, if you can't use simple things, you're going to have a harder time using more complex things. So taking this idea of using what we already know, how about a 1 and a 4? Everybody knows a 1 and a 4 in major. That could be a chord progression, but I'm not creating anything new. 1 and 4 is super common in diatonic major and also minor. It was the second chord of the Jurassic Park theme. Once you realize that these things are pretty much set formulas that everybody's used, you could start messing around with inversions of the same two chords and be okay with it being a known formula, because you reach a stage where you realize almost everything diatonically is a known formula. So if you spend less time trying to create some miraculous new formula, use what you know. Major 7, 9 on the 1, major 7, 9 on the 4. Start experimenting around with stuff like that. On the two chords, do some walking. Inside voice walking. Start exhausting your options on two chords. Maybe you'll revoice the 1 chord to have an add 2 or 9 and a major 7th this way. And maybe do a sus2 chord on the 4 chord, and a chordal shape, which is still a sus2 really, but point is the bass progression is still the same, 1, 4, 1, 4. The chord colors change, it's still the basic same progression. Now breaking out. Okay, I broke it for a reason, and that was to bring the sequence to a close. Nonetheless, I used a well-known bass formula: 4, 3, 6, 2, 5. Now I started to do 11th kind of sounds on the 5, but that doesn't matter. It's still the same bass progression. The breakout: 3, 6, 2, 5. In other words, an extremely functional move with just a circle of fifth bass movement. Very well known. Find new ways to present that 1 in the 4 chord. Maybe with a sharp 11 on the D and the major 7th. Major 7th on the 1, sharp 11, major 7th on the 4. It's still the same chord progression, 1, 4, 1, 4. So this is the question here, where do diatonic chord progressions come from? Even modal. They're all around you, free to use, from Spotify to sheet music that you're reading. These guys did not invent these progressions, they used them, especially in diatonic music. Just like John Williams used 1-4-5 chords as the basis for Jurassic Park. He didn't create a chord progression, he used one. If you actually relax about ever creating the greatest chord progression on the planet, don't. It's usually you using a chord progression like 1, 3, 6, 4, 1. That's already been used thousands and thousands and thousands of times. It's up to you how to use it, okay? So I could just do it in parallel 7th chords like this. That would be one way to use it. And I'm talking about with compositions, by the way. I'm not into keyboard playing. I rarely do this, so... You could use a pentatonic scale over these chords and do something like... which again will give you a completely different feel. And I did add a 5 chord in there. I did 1, 3, 6 as your bass progression, 4, 1, and then bass 5, but mostly with the pentatonic harmony at that point, which we won't bother to classify because I just kind of ran up the scale while holding an E, but it's still the same bass chord progression. So it doesn't matter, you could take this sequence, make all kinds of complex chords, and I'm not really playing in any sort of time right now, I'm just adding tones to these chords or making them sus or maybe chordal up above, major 7th, whatever. That's the point is it's still the same chord progression. So if you free yourself from that thinking that you're going to come up with a new diatonic progression and concentrate more on just creating, then you'll spend a lot of time less wasted on creating chord progressions and more time creating music. And so it could be anything. Let's just do one more example. Same chord progression. 3, 6, 4, 1, 5, 1. Now just doing 1, 4 because we did it earlier. Let's go do that move down to the 3 to 6, 4. Our first non-diatonic chord. The point is I used every chord sequence that we tried in this video. And it may have not been the best thing because I'm just sitting here improvising at this stuff, but when you start to realize that almost every chord progression has been done, you could literally just read through something, borrow their chord progression, literally, because it's already been done before. And the more you study music, the more you'll start seeing these things repeated over and over again. And I actually know that's something people hate to hear, especially I've had students argue with me. There's no possible way everybody's tried every single diatonic chord progression. And you think about this. Hundreds of years of hundreds of thousands of composers all dealing with the same material. What are the chances of you're going to come up with a completely and total original diatonic progression? Probably, I would say around 0. And really good composers know this, and that's why John Williams used 1-4-5 kind of music for a noble theme, as did Beethoven, hundreds of years before. And neither one of them are looking for a brand new, totally never done diatonic progression. They're using material they know to create new music, and chord progressions are found, like I said, freely. You could go on Spotify, you could take a chord progression, rearrange it into new music. You could go look at sheet music, take it, rearrange it, because it's most likely that they took it from someone else. In fact, I'll rephrase that. It's highly likely that they've actually seen it from someone else before they used it. When you become comfortable with that, chord progressions are no longer a problem in pure diatonic music. But creative output increases because you're not worried about that aspect.